Despite the fact the world community found a political consensus about the SDGs, and despite the fact that we know how we're going to do it, there was one question we were not able to answer. How are we going to finance our future? How are we going to finance SDGs? And the reason why this question had been so important for us is as simple as that. If we do not come up with a very good answer to this question, we basically failed with the whole UN proposal of financing SDGs. The whole debate at the UN on SDGs would have remained a philosophical debate about peace and freedom and sustainability. Everybody would join in, but as long as we cannot answer that question, how to finance that, the whole debate was useless. The question is as simple as that. The conventional way to do it is that we have central banks who are creating money. We have a commercial banking system who takes on the money and multiplies it in credits and loans into the real economy where goods and services are produced. And at the end of that value chain, we are taxing and feeing these goods and services and redistribute part of that money into development goals and development aid. This mechanism of redistributing money is the main mechanism we're dealing if it comes to social ecological projects or if it comes to global common goods. But if you look closer to this mechanism, we can realize that this mechanism itself is flawed. It's too low in volume, too slow in speed, and it's skewed. Impact funding is a good thing, right? You de-invest, you take money, you de-invest from the black or brown economy, means high carbon economy, and reinvest the money into green economy. It's a good thing to do. But if you look closer to what impact funding is doing, there's 3 or 4 flaws we have to take into consideration. The first one is the volume involved. We're talking about in impact funding globally of 230 to 250 billion US dollars every year. Just to remind you, we're talking about SDG billing 10 times more, 20 times more. So this mechanism of reinvesting money from the black and brown economy into the green economy is too slow, and it's too low in volume. And furthermore, impact funding is skewed and flawed. Just consider, impact funding has very high ESG standards. So if you are an investor, you have to meet these standards. Otherwise, you don't qualify for a green ranking. And you say, I want to go out of the brown and black investments. I want to basically clean my balance sheet, getting into green investments. You can do that. But what you're doing here is basically you sell your brown and black investments to someone else. If it was a coal mine, the coal mine will still pollute the air, whether it's run by the Vatican or by any other management. So the balance sheet of the Vatican is fine, but the environment is still polluted. So this mechanism of reinvesting money in the green sector is one small component of the whole picture. However, it's a very small one. A tunnel is always drilled from both sides. It's bottom up and top down. We have a lot of bottom up approaches for a better world. But we need also a top down approach, which basically has finance ministers, central bankers, institutional investors, and the executive offices on a national level at the table. What we're talking about this afternoon is financial engineering in the Anthropocene. Anthropocene means first time in Earth history. It's a human species, which is in the driver's seat, where everything is connected with everything, happening within planetary boundaries. And this is changing not only economics, and not only politics, and financial risk assessment, and maturities, and liabilities. It's changing our mindset, the way we think, the way we behave, the way we live. We have to get the figures right. So if we decide politically that we want the SDGs to happen, we're talking about a $5 trillion bill. And the question is, where does the $5 trillion come from? It's not that institutional investors would not want to have everything in green. It's they have liabilities, they have forms of skin in the game they can't get rid of in the first place. This is why we have to look closer to what's required. And we call it an ExSwap PPP. That's a new financial engineering instrument I would like to explain to you. X stays simply for the fact that brown economy is history, and got money for that, to do that. You want to make sure that these trillions basically are insured and stay the same. You need an alternative investment. The technical term is a swap. A swap is an instrument which gives an institutional investor the possibility to exchange his asset from brown to green in very short time. And we're talking about big money. For example, talking about reforesting the Sahara or electrifying the Sahara. Because behind these institutional investors who have the skin in the game in the brown economy is basically the baby boomers with their pension funds and their entitlements to consume for the next 20, 30 years. For the institutional investor, there is no incentive getting out of this business model without having an adequate investment alternative in place. But that's not enough. We're talking about X, we're talking about swap. The third aspect is the PPP. This swap is always part of a private-public partnership. There's about 6 to 8 different subforms available. But the point is, when we swap into a new world. We swap into a world where private and public can't be separated 100%. You know, how do you want to invest to make sure we have clean air, for example? It's not a private business. In fact, about 1/3 of the SDGs are eligible for private funding, but 2/3 are not. 2/3 are global common goods, which means they require a public co-signer who is interested not in private yields, but in public yields. The World Bank, IMF, European Investment Bank, African Development Bank are such co-signers who can ensure that swap. And there's one part missing. It's about the parallel currency in place. Why a parallel currency system? Why? Because it's easier to ride a bike with 2 wheels instead of 1. If we had a dual currency in place, earmarked for SDGs and basically running through new electronic distributed ledger technology, basically blockchain. Okay, we would be able to finance SDGs within a very short time. And actually, Christine Lagarde gave a talk in Singapore at the end of last year, first time in central bank history, talking about central bank digital currency running in parallel. She's not 100% there yet with regard to SDGs, but she's halfway through. So what's missing is that we have to understand that the dual system is much more resilient against asymmetric shocks than a monoculture. This is true not only for the monetary system, by the way. This is true for agriculture system. This is true for the power grid. This is true for any form where we are encountering diversity, which is more resilient than any form of monoculture. NGOs will be in this symphony, will be the enactors. The NGOs will be those who will be funded to make it happen. We have about 5 million NGOs on the planet. 95% are underfunded. They have huge qualification, a lot of expertise out there, huge expertise, but chronically underfunded. SDGs funding would require the SDGs as an intermediary to ensure that in Sub-Sahara, the wells are drilled at the right place, and the kindergartens are built the right way, and the healthcare providers are trained in the right way. This is done by NGOs. Having two currency systems in place, it's like yin and yang. One for the conventional way we're doing economics, and a parallel one, which is basically addressing the future. And this is why I call it the power of finance. This is the path to go.